Jay Crouch here with Grant Liffmann and Kurt Helin to talk NBA free agency. We're going to talk player options, the June 30 deadline decisions to be made, and then we'll talk about who are the most captivating unrestricted and restricted free agents. Grant, I'll start with you on the June 30 deadline. What is most interesting to you around that date?
Yeah, usually it's a little unsexy to talk about team and player options versus unrestricted and restricted free agents. But these guys, there are some important decisions coming up. And one I want to point to is Andrew Wiggins. He has a player option moving forward, and it's for $30 million. But really what made it interesting is once Giannis and that trade happened, this team is in need of good players to fill out their roster. And the need for Andrew Wiggins just got stronger. The problem is that if they're going to try to extend him, this option, how Wiggins approaches it, Wiggins can decline his option and extend out, but they need to extend in such a way that allows them to bring back a player like a Norman Powell, et cetera, which I can talk about a little later on. So Wiggins is a key piece to this Heat team to figure out what are they building here, because if you add his length, his athleticism, his defensive abilities, right? People forget that this is a really strong defender. You put him next to Giannis and you put him next to Bam, that is a very formidable defensive, switchable, versatile team. So how he plays this out with his option is a massive, massive decision. And really, if my expectation is right, I think he will decline it and figure out a team friendly-ish in the way they construct the numbers moving forward, but also give him extra years. That would be my guess, what they're going to do there with the Miami Heat. And then maybe a less big deal, but something to keep an eye on. San Antonio has a team option on Julian Champagnie, and I think he showed that he has meant a lot to this team. But you also have to remember, it's only a $3 million team option. If San Antonio wants to construct a team this year and use that $3 million as just, hey, I'm going to pay you this and then we'll figure it out later on, they could definitely do that. Could they instead just extend off of it or decline it and figure out and go from there? Sure. And I think there's a good chance they do that. But if there's any big fish are trying to do double down here, if Champagnie's asking for too much money, they could literally just pick up that team option and say, hey, we're going to pay you $3 million for a guy who is a starter and made us one of the best starting units in the NBA. So I think that is another person to keep an eye on.
Yep. Kurt, we're contractually obligated to talk about Jonathan Kuminga, as all NBA content vehicles must talk about Jonathan Kuminga every 30 minutes, lest the world explode. He has a $24.3 million team option. Do you expect the Hawks to pick up that option? What do you think is going to happen with Kuminga?
Yeah, it's kind of like the lost number thing, right? Like if you don't talk about it, everyone's
Desmond Hume.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really curious what they do because Kuminga worked for them. Like on the court, it was a pretty good fit. Was it a $23 million fit? I think that they would love to have him to not pick up that option and find a more comfortable number for them. But I don't know if Kuminga is going to do that. I also don't think, though, I don't know that there's some massive market for Jonathan Kuminga out there that I am seeing. So I think it's reasonable to think that they're going to drop this team option, but extend him at a lower number that helps them with the long-term books on a team that's going to get it. Look, I like Atlanta, but that's going to get pricey.
Yep. Kurt, I know you're a big LA guy, big LA personality. So I want to ask you about Marcus Smart and DeAndre Ayton, who were the big moves for the Lakers last offseason when they didn't have a ton of resources. Thought Ayton was, par. He was fine. He did what it was expected. I thought Marcus Smart was really good for the Lakers and over-delivered based on expectations around him. Do you expect them both to be back in LA?
Well, Ayton's got a player option, and he will pick that up. It's at 8.7, a little over 8 million, whatever the exact number is. And I just can't see him turning that down because I'm not sure that's out there for him. It was funny to watch because Laker fans were so high on the potential and then kind of came to realize that he's DeAndre Ayton. And he wasn't bad. He was exactly what you should expect from him, which was fine. And he's if he were the backup at 8 million, you'd be okay with that. They've just got to find something more dynamic. But I don't think he thinks that money's out there. He'll be back with them next year. Marcus, like you said, exceeded expectations, partially because he was just healthy. This was the healthiest he's been in a long time. He brings the combination of defense and shooting and willingness to step up in the big moments that they really actually need, even when they bring LeBron back. They probably bring him back on that option, but I think that if they could work out a reasonable deal, look, the Reeves thing, they worked out the number, but he is going to be the very last thing to officially happen so that they can get everybody else in under the cap. They might try to work out something a little, you're not going to go super long-term with Marcus, but to add more years and keep him around because he's become kind of important to what they do as currently structured.
Absolutely. Grant, let's pivot to the free agents. Who are some unrestricted or restricted guys who you're particularly interested in?
Obviously, there's a number of guys we can talk about. We've just talked about LA. How about LeBron James? But a couple of guys that I want to mention. Number one was Norman Powell. And I mentioned him before about the Heat situation. Norman Powell had an all-star year, like a really underrated. No one talked about how good Norman Powell was last year for the Miami Heat. And bringing him back is going to be difficult. They want to work things out, but the numbers now get tricky with the aprons and Giannis coming. So how they structure Wiggins' deal, if they can figure something out there, how they make some moves to make it. Norman Powell could be a piece that's brought into many different teams and make them that much better, but Miami needs him more than anyone. So how that plays out is massive. But the one guy that I'm just so curious to see how this goes is a restricted free agent, Walker Kessler. Because obviously things got a little public with the way it played out. And they were saying that, Walker wants this much money and he's disappointed with this group. And when it starts getting a little tricky in public, it gets a little unfortunate and there's some awkwardness there. So you have to remember the Utah Jazz want Walker Kessler. And I think part of the calculation they made when getting Jaren Jackson Jr. was the idea they're bringing back Walker Kessler. Because if you don't, that is a terribly bad rebounding front line in Lowry and Jaren Jackson Jr. and kind of limits a little bit of what they do on that team defensively if Walker's not there. So they do have pressure. Now, one team that I thought maybe could get into sweepstakes got taken away, and that's the Chicago Bulls when they got Nick Claxton. But what that did do also is open up a huge gap on the Brooklyn Nets, who now have a spot open next to Julius Randle for, let's say, a nice young defensive center. So the point is, I do think there are places that Walker could go and maybe just drives up the money potentially as well. But how that plays out could be a huge factor in the way we're talking about the Jazz in the future. Because if you have that front line, if you get Lowry, JJJ, and Walker Kessler to go with Darren Peterson and Keontae George and Ace Bailey, there's so much talent there. But having a guy, a key cog right there to really anchor that defense means a ton. So I'm watching that one closely.
Yeah, Walker Kessler is very much the kind of, it feels like he's going to be the Miles Turner of his generation. Just consistently, I've been hearing his name in trade rumors, it feels like daily for a while. But what do you think of Kessler, Kurt?
Utah has to keep him also just because they're in the West. If you ultimately want to compete in the West, we were talking about this previously. They've got Victor Wembanyama. You've got Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein and now Mara. You've got size all over this conference. You have got to have kind of a bruising big in there to mix it up. And as Grant said, they become an unimpressive, not really tough inside rebounding physical team without Kessler. And we'll see. I count me among the group that if the offer is really 5/140, so $28 million a year, that seems really reasonable for Walker Kessler right now. He might want some player option on the end of that or something, but I don't know how many teams. I guess there maybe Brooklyn. I just don't know how many teams are going to come in over the top for a guy who played 5 games last year because of his shoulder injury.
Yeah. The last time we saw Walker Kessler consistently on a basketball court was the end of 2 seasons ago, where the Jazz had him jacking like 8 threes a game at stretches because I think that they were not particularly invested in winning games down the end of that season. A name that I want to throw out is Peyton Watson, who I think is fascinating. Yeah. I think the Celtics probably have the most interesting offseason just because they're literally the betting favorites to make the finals right now in the East, and they're trying to trade the guy who finished 6th in the MVP. So I think that they're probably just the most consequential. But I think the other most interesting offseason is Denver, who everyone has just kind of discarded because of how it ended, losing in 6 to the Wolves with like Terrence Shannon cooking guys in ISO. It was just such an inglorious ending for the Nuggets. But the Nuggets played that series. They played the back half of it with no Aaron Gordon, who's their 3rd best player, and they played all of it without Peyton Watson, who I think last year was probably their fourth best player. This team, when healthy, I still think has massive upside. When Aaron Gordon was on the court with Nikola Jokic last year, they had a plus 20 net rating and a 134 offensive rating. This was like in over 600 minutes. This team was a juggernaut when Gordon and Jokic were healthy together. Jokic did not look particularly in shape by the end of the season. And if you see the footage of him with Serbia, he's doing incredible marketing for compression T-shirts, or he's lost a lot of weight. So he has, I think there is upside with Jokic bouncing back, coming off further removed from the knee injury as well. And Peyton Watson, how is he going to fit into this? Because they're at the second apron like right now without re-signing Peyton Watson. So I think they want to bring him back. If you look at guys like, Dyson Daniels got 4 years, 100 million. Shaedon Sharp got 4 years, 90. Like, I think that's going to be Peyton Watson's type of range. And they're going to have to move off of either Christian Brown, who until Trae Young might have had the worst contract in the league, and guys like Cam Johnson on an expiring, they're going to have to move him. So I think that there is, for a team that, arguably has the second best player in the world and should have championship aspirations, this is a massive piece for them. So, Kurt, what do you think about Peyton Watson? And are there any other free agents who are particularly compelling to you?
Watson, they have to keep, but there's a lot of interest. I mean, we were talking about teams that need 3-and-D players, like the Lakers. Like, bringing Peyton Watson back to Southern California would be the kind of hand-in-glove fit that they're looking for. And I do know Denver is testing the market. They want to. They know they probably got to move off Christian Brown, but they probably have to attach something to that now. And maybe he can bounce back somewhere, because I do think he's a good player, but he's going to have to prove that. Speaking of the Lakers, the odd man out there might be Rui Hachimura, who is a 6'8" guy who can do a lot of things well and has played really well in the playoffs the last 2 years. He's really stepped up in those games. If you plugged him into, I don't know, if you put him where Tobias Harris was in Detroit or something, like, I could see some natural fits around the league where Rui is going to land somewhere and be really valuable. And I'm not sure it can be with the Lakers. It just seems, especially if they want to bring back Luke Kennard and his shooting, it seems like the odd man out. The other guy I'm kind of watching is out of Houston. If we're talking about 3-and-D guys everybody wants, Tari Eason could really help a lot of teams. Like, he can shoot the three. He is a really good defender. And I'm not sure he's not a little bit squeezed out in Houston. Wouldn't mind being somewhere where he gets a little more space and a little more run.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And again, Peyton Watson is another person that if a team wants to just make sure they can get him, it's a price thing. Denver can't afford him if they go too high. And so maybe you load up the money, the contract up front and try to steal him. That's another person. I agree with you, Kurt, about those names. I predicted, Jay, before that Rui is a perfect spot in San Antonio to take that Harrison Barnes corner position right there. And then as for the rest of the free agents out there, space dries up pretty quickly. There's only a couple teams that really have that space to get guys. And so every agent uses that team. They're like, oh yeah, well, Brooklyn, they're really interested. You're going to see Brooklyn's name come up with everybody in Chicago and stuff like that. It's just, it's every team, and there's only so much space. So it'll be interesting to see how this play out. But Tari Eason is another guy, as you said, that does fit the mold of, hey, let's invest in someone like this because he can make us a better franchise and a better team. And that's why I think there are certain teams that have some space. I could see Tari Eason fitting perfectly in Charlotte. I really like him there. So there are some pieces to be moved, and I'm excited. I think there's a really good chance that we see new teams really performing well this next year with the lottery reform. I think there's just going to be teams that you're just going to be like, oh, that's a really fun team to watch. I want to see them grow. I think we're going to see more of that.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we'll leave it there for now. Plenty to look forward to as free agency kicks off June 30th at 6 p.m. Eastern.
Hit subscribe for more news, highlights, and analysis from the NBA and NBC.